My mother-in-law does not believe in allergies of my baby, and I paid the price with the loss of my child. Hello. I am a first-time poster, but I discovered this subreddit a few months ago. I was discussing this subreddit with my therapist, and she assigned me the task of speaking out more about my experience to see if it alleviated my agony. I've written and deleted this post around 7 times already, but I believe it's time to publish it. I've been speaking English for 30 years, but it's not my native language, and I occasionally use the incorrect word because that's what the straight translation is. So, I apologize in advance if I have confused anyone. This is going to be a long post because I'm a rambler and there is a lot of backstory to cover. This occurred on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2005, 12 years, 2 months, and 13 days ago. My spouse and I married in 2002 and had our kid 10 months later that year. In May 2004, we welcomed our twin daughters. My family was beautiful. Whenever I snapped a picture of us, we looked like the families in stock photos you can find. My wonderful spouse is an engineer, and I am a college professor. We had a wonderful home in the city. Our kids were healthy and joyful. We even had a golden retriever named Argo. As if we weren't the epitome of familial happiness, I can't look at images of us anymore because they make me upset. My twin girls were born without incident in the hospital. They were born on their due date, latched flawlessly, and passed all postnatal testing with flying colors. When we got them home, we found that one of the girls, let's call her OD, older daughter, because she was 4.5 minutes older than her sister, had developed a rash. I hadn't dealt with allergies in children before because my son didn't have them, nor did any other child or adult in my family. I was unsure what it was. I wondered if she had delicate skin like mine. I can't wear certain textiles because I have extremely dry skin, and I frequently break out in rashes when my skin decides it doesn't like something. So I stopped applying fabric softener on all my outfits. I purchased the nicest, most comfortable bedding and clothing. At one point, I even created her clothes myself out of worry that something in the production process would upset my older daughter. We went to the doctor multiple times, and they knew she was experiencing an allergic reaction to something, but every test came back negative, and we had no idea what it was. It took 3 additional months to figure it out. During that period, her allergic reactions became increasingly acute. She was once the only infant in the hospital's history who needed to be kept in a clean room since she appeared to react the moment she left. When this happened, we started an elimination therapy that rivaled the lifestyle of Buddhist monks. My husband and I moved our son and younger daughter in with his parents since we needed to remove everything from our routine in order to determine what was causing our elder daughter's reaction. We quit using soap, shampoo, deodorants, and laundry detergents before we ever addressed our food. It took 3 more months, but we finally figured it out. Our oldest daughter was allergic to coconuts. The experts explained that it was a very unusual allergy, thus it was not included in any of the skin test panels they did. We were so glad when we discovered what she was allergic to, but in addition to feeling relieved, I burst out laughing. I laughed so hard that I cried, and my darling hubby still can't tell if I was crying out of relief or sheer delight. I hail from a community that uses coconut nearly religiously. It's in our cookery, and we break open coconuts at religious rituals. It is used in practically all desserts. It's everywhere. I was giggling because I despised one particular application of coconut. My mother would constantly apply coconut oil in my hair when I was a kid, up until maybe the 8th grade. It appeared greasy as hell. I despised it. And once I was old enough to do my own hair, I never put that thing in it again. I was laughing so hard because of course I had a daughter who was severely allergic to the one thing I had despised my entire life. We had a lot of fun telling people about her allergy, and everyone laughed because they knew I despise coconut oil. We told my mother, and she laughed too. She joked that my kid must have heard me talking about my disdain for coconut oil while she was still cooking inside me and decided she needed to despise it as well. We all had a nice laugh, and that was that, or so I thought. My mother and I have always had a rocky relationship, at best. We got along well enough, yet we disagreed strongly on some issues. She wanted a typical daughter who would be devout, earn her MPS degree, marry a man she and my father chose, which is usual where I'm from, have 2 children, live in the suburbs near her, and be a stay-at-home mom like her. I am not religious in the slightest. I earned 2 undergraduate degrees, a master's and a PhD, married at the age of 27, late in my culture, and married a man who was diametrically opposed to my parents' wishes. As if that wasn't enough, I was a working mother who didn't need her to babysit because my husband and I earned enough money to hire a part-time babysitter ourselves. Essentially, the best way I can explain our relationship is to say that she was really proud of me and enjoyed talking about my successes, but I could see she wished I was somebody else. We have a lot of safe topics to chat about, but I could never discuss something too serious with her, like politics or my profession. Not because she'd be furious with me, but because she simply wasn't interested. I despise getting into talks where I'm passionate about something, and the other person couldn't care less. When it came to raising my children, children, my mother was a just yes person 99.9% of the time. She was hands-off and respected all of my judgments, even when she disagreed with them. For example, I chose not to raise my children religiously, but I did take them to community activities to help them appreciate their heritage, and my mother never pressured them to pray. The one thing she was always complaining about was the coconut oil. You see, my girl's hair is incredibly textured and curly. We're not sure where they got it, especially since my husband and I have pin-straight hair that won't even hold a paperclip without slipping. I loved it. It was a little harsh, and my mother insisted that a small amount of oil would soften and define the curls. I've always said no. Sure, we could have used a different sort of oil, but my daughters were still so young, and the allergy process had made me nervous about introducing new items into their routine. I also made care to explain why to my mother. She remembered how we had dealt with her older daughter's allergies. She brought me food and clothes to the hospitals on several occasions. She assisted me in removing all of my furniture and clothing from my home, while I was eliminating all probable allergy sources. She taught me how to cook from scratch while I was removing certain foods from the children's diet. She was well aware of my older daughter's troubles. I still can't comprehend how she did what happened next. November 2nd, 2005. I was giving a midterm to my students that day, and I needed to be at my research lab late that night. My husband was gone at a conference, and our nanny had the flu, so she couldn't watch the kids that day. So I had my mother come take them for the day. My son was almost 3 years old, and the girls were 1.5 years old. Overnight visits with my parents were not common, but they were also not unusual. They had always returned from these visits quite happy and well cared for. So I had no reservations about leaving them with my parents. They called me after lunch, and we video talked at around 5 p.m. The kids were all quite happy and healthy. I went home at 10:30 p.m. that night and called my mom to see if the kids were awake so I could say goodnight. I missed the kids by approximately 20 minutes. They had already gone to bed. So I talked to my mom for a few minutes, but she's also an early sleeper. So we hung up and went to bed. I got up about 5 a.m. the next morning to pick up my hubby at the airport at 6. We planned to eat breakfast together before heading out to pick up the kids. I picked up my husband, and neither of us was particularly hungry, so we decided it would be a great treat to pick up the kids first and then go to breakfast or brunch with my parents. We arrived at my parents' place about 7 a.m. My parents weren't present. My son was at the neighbor's house and raced outside with him as soon as he spotted my husband and I arrive. He was hysterically crying, and I couldn't get him to stop. My blood pressure was increasing because I was worried that something bad had occurred to my parents. My neighbor says she's not sure what's going on, but there was an ambulance at my parents' house at 6 a.m., and my father had ran over and woke them up to ask if they could watch my son for a few hours until he returned. Of course, they had said yes. I'm contacting my parents nonstop at this point, and I'm getting frantic because I have no idea what's occurred. My son was still wailing, but he was more relaxed. However, he was still unable to describe what had transpired. I honestly don't recall what happened next, but we figured out that the ambulance was from a local hospital and broke multiple traffic regulations trying to get there. We arrived at the hospital, parked into the emergency door designated for ambulances, exited the car, and sprinted inside. A couple nurses noticed us right away and asked what was happening. I was calmer than my wonderful husband at this point, so I explained that I didn't know, but my twin daughters and parents were somewhere nearby. I'll never forget that nurse's expression. She recognized me and was about to cry. Another nurse led my husband and me to an empty room and instructed us to calm down and listen to the doctor before proceeding to find my relatives. My mother had applied coconut oil in both of my daughters' hair while they were playing the day before. Before bed, the girls enjoyed having my mother do their hair, so they requested braids when my mother was doing their hair. She applied coconut oil in both of their hair to make the braids smoother. According to my son, my older daughter became dizzy and itchy when my mother was fixing her hair, so she gave her some children's Benadryl, which made her sleepy. Because it was close to bedtime, the youngsters went to bed. We gave her Benadryl anytime she had a mild reaction because it generally suggested she had accidentally ingested some coconut from a secondary source. We also bathed her from head to toe right after to remove any evidence of it. My mother simply gave her Benadryl, left the coconut oil in her hair, and put her to sleep. Benadryl made her asleep, preventing her from waking up, being cognizant enough to wake up her brother, or crying. She vomited in her sleep, and the rash appeared all over. Her small body had swelled to twice its size. She had asphyxiated during her sleep. She died terribly and slowly in the early morning. My mother discovered her when she went to check on the kids about 7 a.m. She had already died by then. My mother screamed and called for my father, and they went to the hospital. My father had no idea about the coconut oil until my mother explained, and I've never seen him so angry. When I saw him at the hospital, he couldn't look at my mother in anger or at me in humiliation. They had hurried to the hospital, searching for a means to rescue my older daughter, while also getting my younger daughter checked out right away because he suspected she had a moderate allergy. I can't even tell you how my husband and I felt. I recall seeing my tiny girl and being in denial. There was no way she was gone. This had to be a dreadful nightmare. The events that followed, such as the funeral and explaining what had occurred to my other children, are things I still can't talk about since they broke a part of me. My mother and her family were examined. My children were almost taken away by my country's version of Child Protective Services because they were deemed dangerous. My beloved husband and I had to battle tooth and nail to prove that uprooting them at this time would be the worst thing for them. My mother has never been arrested. My father did leave her, even if they are not legally divorced. The bulk of my mother's family refuses to speak with her, and those who do speak with her do so only seldom. She currently lives alone in a tiny town, and every couple of months I get a phone from her saying how sorry she is, how she wasn't thinking, and how I should find a way to forgive her. She wants to come see me. The only thing I can ever say to her is, "You can come see me when you bring my daughter with." It's been 13 years. My oldest son received his driver's license this year, and my younger daughter will begin high school soon. Both are healthy, and they are maturing into wonderful adults, but neither has been the same since the older daughter died. My elder son is highly protective of his baby sister, and he does not tolerate unpleasant breathing in his presence. My younger sister used to be a cheerful, outgoing little girl, but she's quiet now. When she speaks, it takes some effort to hear her because she is so quiet. She told me a few years ago that she understands she was only a baby when it happened, but she feels incomplete all the time, as if a piece of herself is gone. I wasn't sure what to say to her. Without my lovely spouse, I don't think I would have been able to recover from the loss of my daughter. We have helped each other get through the loss. It took more than a decade of therapy to reach this stage. I'm not sure what I'm expecting from typing all of this out, but I've seen how much comfort other users have found on this subreddit, so I'm hoping to get some of the same serenity. Thank you for reading.